Dust fell from the arena ceiling like slow snow, catching the light from 1,000 floating lanterns. Today was the day the young dragons of the Empire would choose their bonded companions, and the whole capital had come to watch. Rows of nobles sat in golden boxes, fanning themselves and whispering about which champion would be picked by which bloodline. Warriors stood tall in polished armor, chins high, waiting to be chosen. Senators smiled for the cameras. Everyone wanted to be seen. Nobody looked at the man sweeping the stands. Rel Dawson moved slowly along the top row, pushing a broom that had seen better decades. His left leg dragged slightly with every second step, a leftover gift from a mining tunnel that had collapsed on him years ago. He kept his eyes down. He always kept his eyes down now. It was easier that way. He used to be someone once. Not famous, not rich, but respected in his own small circle of tunnel workers. That felt like another life. Now he cleaned up after the important people and tried not to be noticed. Below, in the center of the arena, the dragon hatchlings were released one by one. They came out shining and enormous, some with wings the size of sailing ships, others with scales that shimmered like cut gemstones. Each one soared over the crowd, circling, searching, before landing in front of a chosen human or alien companion. The crowd cheered every time. This was the highest honor in the Empire. To be chosen by a dragon meant power, wealth, and a place in history. Then came the last hatchling. It was small, painfully small. Where the others had wingspans that blocked out the sun, this one was barely larger than a hunting hawk. Its scales were a dull, pale copper, nothing like the deep golds and blues of its siblings. Murmurs of laughter rippled through the crowd. "That's the runt," someone said from the noble boxes. They should have culled it before the ceremony. The small dragon's name, according to the breeders, was Corin. It had been the smallest hatchling born in the Empire's royal halls in over 300 years. The breeders had almost not let it participate in the ceremony at all, worried it would embarrass the program. Corin flew low over the crowd, wobbling slightly, wings working twice as hard as any of the others just to stay in the air. Champions straightened their backs as it passed, hoping to spite the odds. Nobles leaned forward. A famous general in the third row actually held out his arm, certain even the runt would want a hero. Corin passed him without slowing. It passed the senators. It passed the armored warriors. It passed every single person the Empire considered worth choosing. Then it turned, flew straight up toward the top row, and landed directly in front of Rel Dawson. The broom fell from his hands. For a moment, the entire arena went silent. 10,000 people stared upward in confused disbelief. Then the whispering started, followed by open laughter from several noble boxes. Is this a joke? That's not even a citizen of note. He's nobody. The smallest dragon in the Empire, choosing the least important man in the stadium. Fate has a strange sense of humor. Rel stood frozen, staring down at the small copper dragon looking up at him with bright golden eyes. He opened his mouth, unsure of what to even say. There's some mistake, he finally managed. I'm not anyone. I clean the stands. Corin tilted its head, unbothered by the noise below. It stepped closer and pressed its small snout against Rel's hand. Warmth spread through his arm, gentle and strange, like sunlight after a long winter. He had heard about this feeling before, from old stories about the bonding ceremony, but he never imagined it would happen to him. The Empire's High Overseer, a tall woman in ceremonial armor, marched up the stands with several guards behind her. Her face was tight with controlled anger. "This cannot stand," she said. "The bonding must be with someone of merit. A soldier, a leader, not a discharged laborer." "The bond has already formed, Overseer," said one of the breeders nervously, checking a glowing device in his hand. "It cannot be undone. Not by us. Not by anyone." The Overseer's jaw tightened. She looked at Rel like he was a stain that had appeared on something important. "Then explain to me," she said, "why the rarest dragon in 3 centuries chose a nobody even remembers." Rel had no answer. He looked down at Corin, who was now curling around his ankle like a cat greeting an old friend, utterly unconcerned with the chaos its choice had caused. Whatever the reason was, only the little dragon knew it. And it wasn't telling. Not yet. The room they gave Rel and Corin was at the very end of the bonded housing hall, past the grand suites with balconies and fountains, past the modest, but respectable quarters given to lesser champions, all the way to a small door with peeling paint that nobody had bothered to fix. Corin didn't seem to mind. The small dragon hopped onto the foot of the bed, circled twice, and curled into a tight ball, tail wrapped around. "You could have picked anyone," Rel said quietly, more to himself than to the dragon. "Some general with medals. Some senator's kid. Instead, you picked a man who sweeps floors." Corin made a small sound, somewhere between a chirp and a huff, and said nothing else. Dragons could speak through the bond eventually, once it strengthened, but for now there was only feeling. And what Rel felt, faint but steady, was something like patience. Word of the strange pairing spread through the housing halls within a day. Other bonded pairs, dragons and their chosen champions, walked past Rel's door and didn't bother lowering their voices. Imagine being picked last your whole life, and then even the smallest dragon in history picks someone smaller than you. He used to work. Rel kept his head down, the same as always, and focused on caring for Corin instead. He learned quickly that the small dragon was not just physically tiny, but behind on nearly everything a dragon its age should know. It couldn't produce fire yet, not even a spark. Its flying was unsteady at best. When the other young dragons in the courtyard tested their growing strength, blasting scorch marks into training targets or lifting boulders with their claws, Corin sat on the sidelines, watching quietly. The other dragons mocked it in their own way too, snorting smoke in its direction, nudging it out of the best sunny spots on the training grounds. Corin never fought back. It simply moved, found another patch of sun, and waited. "You don't have to just take it," Rel told him one evening, sitting on the stone steps outside their quarters while Corin picked at a piece of dried meat. "You can push back. Stand your ground." Corin looked up at him, and Rel realized, not for the first time, that this small dragon looked at him the same way regardless of what had happened that day. Not with pity, not with disappointment, just steady, quiet attention, the same look Rel used to give the younger miners when they were scared of the dark tunnels ahead. Nobody in the Empire had looked at Rel like that in a long time. He started talking more after that. Small things at first, stories from the mining colony, the names of the men he used to work with, jokes that used to make the crew laugh in the break rooms deep underground. Corin listened to all of it, tail flicking occasionally, as if filing every word away somewhere important. Rel began to feed him by hand each morning, checked the scales along his back for signs of injury from the other dragon's teasing, and made sure the small water dish was always full, even when it meant walking twice as far to the nearest well. It wasn't much. It was what he had. 2 weeks after the bonding ceremony, a formal notice arrived at their door, stamped with the Empire's seal. Rel read it twice before the word settled. All bonded pairs, regardless of standing, were required to compete in the annual proving trials. No exceptions, no excuses. Pairs who failed to compete, or who were eliminated too quickly, would have their bond stripped of Imperial support. No housing, no resources, no protection. He looked down at Corin, who had gone very still, sensing the shift in his mood through the bond. "They want to humiliate us in public," Rel said quietly. "Make an example out of us." Corin stepped closer and pressed against his leg, the same warm, steady feeling flowing through the bond that Rel was beginning to recognize as reassurance. Rel exhaled slowly and looked out at the darkening sky above the training grounds, where the other bonded pairs were still practicing, confident and unafraid. "All right," he said finally, kneeling down to meet Corin's eyes. "Then I suppose we'd better figure out what you can actually do." The proving grounds stretched out beneath a sky full of drifting metal platforms, ancient ruins, and narrow bridges suspended over open air. Thousands had gathered to watch the first round, and cameras hovered above the competitors, ready to broadcast every failure and triumph across the Empire. Rel stood near the starting line, feeling every eye that slid past him and landed on the far more impressive pairs around him. A woman in shining battle armor stood beside a dragon the size of a small ship, its scales a deep sapphire blue, crackling faintly with contained energy. Beside her, a broad-shouldered champion rested a hand on his golden-scaled dragon's neck, both of them looking bored, like this round barely counted as a challenge. Corin, standing at Rel's feet, looked impossibly small next to them. Officials had placed their pair dead last in the lowest bracket, a decision met with laughter from the noble stands. "They'll be eliminated in the first 5 minutes," someone said from the crowd, not bothering to whisper. Let's just get this over with. The horn sounded, and the trial began. The course was not simple combat. It was a maze of shifting terrain, collapsing platforms, narrow tunnels only certain sizes could fit through, and sudden bursts of pressurized steam meant to test both dragon and champion together. Most pairs relied on brute strength, blasting through obstacles or forcing a path with sheer power. Rel and Corin couldn't do that, so they didn't try. Left, Rel called out as they reached the first collapsing bridge, remembering the way pressure worked in old mining tunnels, how weight shifted before a collapse. Don't put your weight on the center plate. Corin adjusted instantly, wings beating hard to skim along the edge instead, small enough to balance where larger dragons would have crashed straight through. Behind them, a massive silver dragon tried to force its way across the same bridge and plunged half a meter as the center plate gave way beneath its weight, its champion cursing loudly. They moved through the tunnel's next, narrow stone passages that had eliminated 2 other pairs already, their larger dragons unable to fit through at all. Corin folded its wings tight and slipped through with room to spare, Rel following close behind, guided by an old habit of counting steps in the dark that came back to him without thinking. You're doing it, Rel muttered, more to himself than to Corin, as they emerged from the tunnels well ahead of 2 eliminated teams. You're actually keeping up. Corin let out a small huff of pride, wings buzzing with barely contained energy. The real test came at the pressurized steam field, a wide-open stretch where bursts of scalding vapor erupted randomly from hidden vents in the ground. Bigger dragons simply flew high above it, safe and unaffected. Corin tried to do the same, wings straining, but a sudden downdraft caught them off guard, and they dropped low, dangerously close to the vents. Rel's mining instincts kicked in before his fear could. Wait, he said sharply, grabbing Corin's attention through the bond as much as with his voice. Watch the ground. The vents pulse in a pattern, 3 seconds apart, then a gap. He had spent years listening to the groan and hiss of unstable tunnels, learning their rhythms to survive. This wasn't so different. Corin trusted him completely, adjusting its flight to match the pattern Rel called out, darting between bursts of steam with sudden, surprising precision. What the small dragon lacked in raw power, it made up for in agility no larger dragon could match in such a tight space. They crossed the field together, scorched slightly at the edges but intact, just as the horn sounded to mark the end of the first round. Rel looked back and realized, with a jolt of disbelief, that only a handful of pairs had made it through at all. Several of the favored, powerful teams were being pulled from the field, injured or eliminated by obstacles too large for their size to navigate safely. The crowd had gone quiet, the earlier laughter replaced by confused murmurs. On a raised platform overlooking the proving grounds, several members of the Empire's ruling Dragon Council watched with narrowed, curious eyes. One of them, an older woman with silver hair and sharp golden eyes very much like Corin's, leaned forward slightly. The smallest dragon in 3 centuries, she murmured, almost to herself, just outmaneuvered half the Empire's finest. Beside her, another council member frowned. A fluke, he said. Beginner's luck, nothing more. The old woman didn't respond right away. Instead, she watched Rel kneel beside Corin, checking gently for injuries, speaking low, steady words of encouragement that had nothing to do with strategy at all. Perhaps, she said finally, or perhaps we've been measuring the wrong things all along. 3 nights after the first round, Rel woke to a strange, quiet pressure in his mind, like a door opening somewhere he hadn't known existed. Corin sat at the foot of the bed, wide awake, golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The bond between them had been growing steadily stronger since the ceremony, but this felt different. Deeper. Rel sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. Corin. Rel. The voice wasn't sound exactly. It formed directly in his mind, small and careful, like someone speaking a new language for the first time. Rel went very still. You can talk, he said, half question, half disbelief. The bond is strong enough now, Corin said. I have wanted to tell you something. Since the ceremony. Rel swung his legs off the bed, giving the small dragon his full attention. All right, I'm listening. Everyone believes I chose you by accident, Corin said. A mistake. A joke of fate. They are wrong. Rel felt something tighten in his chest, old habits telling him to expect disappointment, some explanation that would make sense of why a dragon would want nothing to do with a nobody like him. He braced himself anyway. When hatchlings choose, Corin continued, we do not see rank, or wealth, or strength of body. We sense something else. The Empire calls it the core. It is the truth of who a person really is, underneath everything the world has told them to be. And what did you see in mine? Rel asked quietly. Corin was silent for a long moment, tail curling slowly around its feet. I saw the mining collapse, it finally said. Not the official story. The real one. Rel's breath caught. Nobody talked about that day. Not anymore. I saw you refuse to leave, Corin said, voice steady despite the weight of the memory. While the tunnel came down around you, while everyone else ran for the surface, you went back. 3 times. You carried 2 men out yourself, one on each trip, and went back a 3rd time for the last worker trapped under the support beam, even after your leg was already broken. Rel's hands curled into fists on his knees, old pain rising up sharp and sudden. That's not what the report said, he murmured. The official record gave the rescue credit to the shift supervisor. Said I caused the delay that led to the collapse in the first place. I lost my position, my reputation, everything. I know, Corin said gently. I saw that too. I saw the fear in the men who blamed you to protect their own careers. I saw the truth get buried under convenient lies, because the truth was inconvenient for people with more power than you. Rel sat in silence. Memories he had tried for years to bury rising to the surface all at once. The heat of the collapsing tunnel. The screams. The weight of another man's body across his shoulders as he stumbled toward the surface. Lungs burning, legs shattered, refusing to stop. Nobody believed me, he said quietly. Not one person stood up for me. I did not need anyone to tell me, Corin said. I felt it directly, the moment I saw you in the stands. Your core burned brighter that day than any nobles has in their entire life. Bravery is not loud, Rel. It does not need witnesses to be real. Rel felt something break loose in his chest, something he had been holding tightly for years without realizing how heavy it had become. He reached out and rested a hand gently on Corin's small head, throat tight. That's why you picked me, he said slowly. Not because I'm strong. Because of that day. Strength that only shows itself when it is easy is not truly strength, Corin said. I chose the man who was strongest when it was hardest and when no one else was watching. The next morning, word began to spread quietly through the Dragon Council's inner circles. Whispers passed carefully between advisors, and old mining records suddenly requested from dusty archives. The silver-haired council member who had watched the first trial so closely began asking pointed questions about a mining collapse from years ago, and why the official report seemed to contradict itself in several key places. Rel didn't know about any of this yet. All he knew was that, for the first time in a long time, someone had looked past the broom, the limp, and the forgotten name, and had seen exactly who he really was. And for the first time in years, he began to believe it himself. The second round of the proving trials was supposed to take place on the floating cliffs, a scenic course of stable stone platforms drifting gently above a cushioned safety field. That was the plan, at least, until Rel and Corin arrived at the starting line and found the terrain completely changed overnight. That's not the course we trained for, Rel said, frowning at the officials setting up nearby. One of them shifted uncomfortably. Last-minute adjustment. Weather concerns. This is the new location. The new course was a maze of unstable rock formations hanging above a churning energy storm instead of a safety field, jagged and shifting unpredictably. No cushioned landing waited below. A fall here meant real injury, or worse. Rel noticed the noble box nearest the course, where a man in deep violet robes watched with a thin, satisfied smile. House Caldros. Rel had heard the name whispered around the housing halls. One of the oldest and most powerful noble families in the Empire, deeply embarrassed by the public sympathy growing around a forgotten laborer and his runt dragon. This was done on purpose, Corin said quietly through the bond, following Rel's gaze to the noble box. They want us gone. Then we don't give them the chance, Rel said, kneeling to meet Corin's eyes. You've come this far. We finished this the same way we started. Together. The horns sounded, and the course began. The unstable rocks shifted constantly, some crumbling the moment weight touched them, others swinging wide on hidden pivots. Larger dragons struggled immediately, their weight causing entire platforms to break apart beneath them. Screams and shouted warnings echoed across the course as several pairs scrambled for safety, wings beating hard against sudden gusts from the storm below. Corin's small size, once again, became their greatest advantage. Where heavier dragons crashed through weakened stone, Corin skimmed lightly across the same platforms without triggering their collapse, guided every step by Rel's careful instructions. Ahead, to your right, that formation is cracked at the base, Rel called out, reading the subtle signs of stress in the rock the same way he used to read the walls of mining tunnels. Don't land there. Go left, toward the taller spire. They moved steadily through the chaos, but the storm below grew worse, energy crackling upward in sudden violent bursts. Halfway through the course, a massive platform ahead of them shattered completely, sending a young champion and his dragon tumbling toward the storm. Rel didn't hesitate. Corin, we're going down. That is not the course, Corin said, even as it banked sharply toward the falling pair. I know, Rel said. Do it anyway. They dove together, the storm's wind tearing at them as Corin fought to stay steady. Rel leaned out as far as he dared, using an old rope from his mining kit that he still carried out of habit, and managed to loop it around the falling champion's arm, just as Corin caught the failing dragon's tail in its claws, straining with everything its small body had. It wasn't enough on its own. The weight was too much, dragging them all dangerously close to the storm. Rel, Corin said, voice tight with effort, I need more. I do not know if I have more. Rel felt the bond pulse between them, raw and open, and made a choice without thinking twice. You do, he said firmly. You're not small because you're weak, Corin. You're precise. Focus doesn't need size. Pull us up. I believe in you. Something shifted inside Corin, a pressure building deep in its small chest that it had never felt before. Instead of the wide, brute force other dragons used, a tight, focused burst of golden energy erupted from Corin's wings, an ancestral ability only smaller, more controlled dragons could access. The added lift was sudden and powerful, hauling all four of them safely up and away from the storm's reach. They landed hard on a stable platform, breathing heavily, the rescued champion and his dragon safe beside them. The crowd, which had gone utterly silent watching the near disaster unfold, erupted into stunned applause. Officials rushed the course, and within the hour, evidence of the sabotage was uncovered. Tampered terrain generators traced directly back to a technician employed by House Kaldros. The noble in violet robes was no longer smiling. Rel sat on the platform, exhausted, one arm wrapped protectively around Corin as Imperial guards escorted House Kaldros representatives away amid furious protests. You did it, Rel said quietly, still catching his breath. You really did it. We did it, Corin corrected gently, leaning into him. That is the whole point, Rel. It was always going to take both of us. The Grand Hall of the Dragon Council had not been this full in decades. Every seat was taken, every balcony packed, as the Empire waited to hear the official ruling on the sabotage during the proving trials, and on the strange, small dragon who had rescued a fellow competitor rather than simply finishing the course. Rel stood at the center of the hall, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on him for the second time in his life, though this time felt very different from the mockery of the bonding ceremony. Corin stood beside him, steady and calm, no longer curling nervously at his feet the way it once had. The silver-haired council member rose first, holding a thick folder of old documents that had been quietly gathered over the past several weeks. Before we address the matter of House Kaldros, she said, voice carrying easily through the silent hall, there is another matter that must be corrected first. She turned to face Rel directly. Years ago, a mining collapse in the outer colonies was recorded as an accident caused by worker negligence, specifically attributed to a laborer named Rel Dawson. New evidence, gathered from surviving witnesses and previously suppressed testimony, tells a very different story. Murmurs spread through the crowd as she read the corrected account aloud. The true events of that day, the 3 trips back into a collapsing tunnel, the men carried out one by one, the broken leg ignored until every worker was safely above ground. The credit wrongly given to a supervisor who had, in truth, fled at the first sign of danger. The official record, the council member said, is hereby corrected. Rel Dawson did not cause that collapse. He prevented it from becoming a far greater tragedy, at great personal cost, and was punished for the failures of others. Rel stood very still, throat tight, as years of quiet shame lifted slightly from his shoulders in front of the entire empire. The council then addressed House Caldros directly, stripping the noble family of several titles and privileges for the sabotage of an official imperial trial, a scandal that would follow them for generations. Finally, the silver-haired woman turned her attention to Corin. "In 300 years," she said, "no hatchling has chosen a companion with less status, less power, or less recognition than the one standing before us today." Many called it a mistake, a joke of fate. She paused, looking out over the crowd. "We were wrong to laugh. The bond does not measure size, or wealth, or noble blood. It measures character. And Corin saw something in this man that the entire empire had carelessly discarded. That is not a flaw in our smallest dragon's judgment. It is proof of exactly how sharp that judgment truly is." The applause that followed was unlike anything from the bonding ceremony weeks before, no laughter hidden beneath it this time, only genuine respect. In the weeks that followed, Rel and Corin were offered grand quarters, formal titles, and a seat among the Empire's most celebrated bonded pairs. They considered it, politely, and just as politely declined most of it. They kept their small room at the end of the housing hall, the one with the peeling paint, though someone had quietly repainted the door a warm shade of copper that matched Corin's scales. Rel returned, part-time, to work he understood and enjoyed, helping design safer tunnel supports for the mining colonies, using lessons learned the hardest way possible. Corin, still the smallest dragon in the Empire by a wide margin, grew steadier and more confident with each passing season, no longer bothered by the size of other dragons around it. It had long since stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. One evening, sitting together on the steps outside their quarters, watching the sun set over the training grounds where they had once been mocked as a hopeless pair, Rel scratched gently behind Corin's ear. "Any regrets?" he asked, smiling faintly. "You could have picked someone important, made this easier on yourself." Corin huffed softly, golden eyes glinting with quiet amusement in the fading light. "I did pick someone important," it said. "Everyone else simply hadn't noticed yet." The Empire had spent centuries measuring its dragons by size, and its people by status and reputation. It took the smallest dragon in 300 years, and the man nobody remembered, to quietly prove that both measurements had been wrong all along.